All right, and welcome back to Morning Express. It's now 5 minutes after 7. It's time for the newsroom, where we look at the newsroom and how the stories that have been hitting the headlines have been covered, and angles that possibly would have been covered and maybe have not. So joining me in the studio, we have Dr. Anio Nyakundi, who is a communications lecturer. Well, thank you for joining us. We also have Mwenda Mbijiwe, a security expert and analyst, and Dominic Wabala, who's an investigative journalist. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us. And before we get into the topic of the day, which I'm going to introduce very shortly, maybe just to start off with finding out from you what has been a main headline or a main story for you, and maybe if there are stories that possibly should have been given more time or more headline, news, and maybe have not. I'll start with you, security analyst Mwenda Mbijiwe.
Thank you, Michael, and it's nice to see you again. It's been a minute.
Yes.
Hey, my interesting story was the missing of President Kenyatta. For me, that was very interesting. It's been trending both
with Kenyans going on Twitter over the
Yes, I even saw a meme yesterday that made me laugh. They showed this someone who was sitting at Arboretum, and they said, "Hey guys, I've been here all the time at Arboretum." And I think Kanzedena, the spokesperson at State House, has addressed the issue, although some Kenyans felt that it was insufficiently.
But the question is, was there really an issue? Is it an issue when the president is quiet and possibly even working in the office?
That shows you that we are a nation used to power, used to our hegemonies, our powerful people, and when they go missing, unfortunately for Uhuru's era and the future president from Kibaki going forward, there's no more kind of an around the presidency. In the past, when Moi would miss for one day, there was speculation. I remember I was in high school one time and they said Moi was missing, and there was hula baloo, he has died. There are all manner of stories around. Then Moi showed up and the country came back to life.
I guess that was the time when there was rumors that he was suffering from throat cancer or something.
Yes. And since that time, but now, I don't know if advisors of President Uhuru maybe are trying to create a scarcity kind of a feeling. I think it may not work. These are not the Moi times when there was around the presidency. With the new Katiba, people don't even care where the president is. In fact, most people don't care where he is. They're like, is he okay? Kanzedena is our president working, and yesterday we saw pictures of him with the Ethiopian president. And so long as our president is working, it's fine. It's fine. Absolutely fine.
Okay,
I don't
so
even want to see him.
That stood out.
Yeah.
All right. What about you, Mr. Wabala?
I think for me, the story that would catch an eye is actually what we didn't cover well was the seizure of quite a number, or quite a lump sum of expired contraband goods that were found in Kariobangi yesterday or the day before yesterday by the DCI. And it is goods that have expired that are repackaged and then sold back to us. And that is...
Specifically, I think there was sugar.
There was sugar, there was rice.
And it's not the first time.
It is not the first time,
something
actually.
that has come up
and
before.
I haven't seen it covered prominently in the papers. And the misfortune is that we are the consumers of those goods. So if we are not enlightened on what is happening about that, as with the good work that the DCI is doing, I think we are failing the public, because then we start having unexplained diseases, like a 5-year-old having cancer, or those kind of ailments, which you just can't make sense of. Some of them could be plastic, but we are wishing them away.
And maybe while still on that, gentlemen, the question here being, this is not the first time that it's happened, and did we get to the end of the last scandal? Did we find out the sugar that was supposedly having mercury? Did we get to the end of as to whether it has mercury, or have we swiftly moved on? I remember even at that time, when that was the big story, you'd walk into a restaurant and they would ask you, do you want some mercury in your tea? Yeah. I mean, it became a joke, but the truth of the matter is you might actually be consuming poison.
My take is this, and I might be naive, I stand to be corrected, but I don't think mercury in its organic form can be mixed with sugar. Yes, we had a lot of contraband goods, some of them not so good in being imported from China and such like countries, and was being brought into the country. The operation was justified, it was a very good thing. But we as journalists need to interrogate some of the information that we are being given, because I honestly don't think that in its organic form, Mercury.
Meaning we actually didn't get to the end of that. But let me come to you on what stood out for you this week.
Thank you. It's a story that I thought should have been treated much better. It was a co-decision on Jimmy Wanjigi, and basically why I felt that it should have been treated better is because it's a wake-up call to the practitioners in terms of what we accept into our newspapers. Remember, this is about a death announcement. When you receive a death announcement, how responsible do you become, like trying to find out whether we are killing somebody before his time or someone else is killing that person before his time or her time? And what is our responsibility? Because according to the story, Jimmy Wanjigi and the wife will be compensated to the tune of 8 million shillings.
Correct.
For an advert that was brought to the media house and published.
It actually was published.
Yes.
And that, of course, then leaves us with the question how cautious we are and how that can be published. What checks and balances are put in place before any advert goes on. All right. So thank you, gentlemen. And well, that's what stood out for you. Do let us know. You're also welcome to let us know if there are possibly stories that should have maybe been given more preeminence that were not. And we will be more than happy to see how we can work on that. But now, moving on to the subject of the day. And a pregnant woman and her 3-year-old daughter were killed at Sayangwe village in Matungu sub-county. After the killing, police statistics indicated that the gang left 13 people dead in a month. Let us just look at that story before we continue with the newsroom.
Her 3-year-old daughter were killed at Sayangwe village in Matungu sub-county. After the killings, police statistics indicated that the gang attacked and left 13 people dead in a month.
The issue of killings, we have had so far 13 in a span of 2 months.
Matungu Deputy County Commissioner, however, maintains the gangs have killed 5 people.
Wala ambao wamekatakatwa, wala ambao nitakwambia for sure, ukiongeza na huyu ni watu 4. Na kuna wale wengine ambao wamekufa kwa njia nyingine ambayo haieleweki.
After the latest killings, members of the public lynched 2 suspects allegedly linked to the notorious gang, which is said to strike in the dead of the night.
Wakaenda wakamshika na wakaanza kumpigia huko, wakaenda wakampigia pale, hivyo ndo penye walimmalizia.
Kuna mwenye alikuja hapo kijana mwingine na rungu, kamgonga na akamtishia kwa pikipiki. Hapo ndio watu walianza kusema ati hatuna boy tena.
Family members of one of the lynched young man insisting that their son was innocent.
Ni wazi kwamba ameuawa kimakosa kwa sababu yeye hakupatikana na chochote, hakupatikana na silaha, hakupatikana akipiga mtu, hakupatikana kivunja cha mtu, amepatikana nyumbani na wamemtoa nyumbani.
Political leaders together with security agencies held a closed-door meeting to discuss the ways of mitigating the situation. Some feel that these are politically motivated killings.
They've given us assurance that they have put everything in place to ensure that they restore peace in this constituency. And at the same time, we also urging the member of the public, kama kuna information yoyote wako nayo, wasiogope kuletea polisi.
Kama kuna mambo ya siasa, wote tumekubaliana na hao viongozi kwamba hata wao wenyewe mambo ya investigation wataitwa, wafanye nini, watuambie ni nini ambao wanajua.
Hata wa investigate kama ni mimi Murunga na usika kisiasa, asiwachwe nje, na mimi naunga hiyo mkono.
Administration police officers at Ijinja AP camp in Matungu constituency in Kakamega County have been transferred with immediate effect following the spate of killings. The killing of Sleiman raises questions if all those who have been arrested and lynched were really guilty or some of them were even innocent. Willie Lusigekete News in Matungu.
All right, so the reports that we have so far, 20 people killed, 50 injured, and there doesn't seem to be much in terms of reports coming out of this, and also the police not giving us much information, government not seeming to crack the whip. I'll start with you, Mwenda Mbijiwe, with whether you have any concerns when one area has 30 people, or rather 20 people dead out of attacks which cannot be explained. You have 50 injured. Of course, the police have come out and said that out of the 20, 13 were killed and 7 were, it was mob justice. But from a security expert's eye, what is it that we're not seeing out of this story?
Thank you. This, of course, reminds us the other stories that we've heard in different parts of the country. We've heard this in Kericho for a very long time. Actually, in Kericho, even the citizens now took it upon themselves to defend themselves. And it's unfortunate that this would happen in our country at this time. However, there is almost a decline in so many of us of our value for life. In fact, I don't know if our people are involving themselves in drugs or something that sets their brain aside, but the sudden decline onto the value of life. See, when a young man allegedly travels from Thika, gets to Eldoret, buys a shocker, then walks around looking for his girlfriend or some woman who's supposed to be his girlfriend, and then in broad daylight, hacks her to death. And such other instances, in Meru, a young man, disagrees with his girlfriend, that girl was late to rest yesterday, kills her in the house and then goes to her bathroom and hangs himself. What's happening to our country? Are we losing the value of life? Maybe it's time, maybe our leaders, our MPs, our senators, governors, and even the president address themselves on this issue. Maybe we need a national address where the president makes it so clear to Kenyans that, hey, there's the sanctity of life, and it's not upon you to decide when someone should not be alive. Okay, but now coming back to Matungu, are these incidences, in your opinion, from an expert's eye, isolated criminal incidents where maybe it was just criminals by chance, or could there be more? I mean, 20 people dead in one area? There could be a gang, for example, that is thriving on this. Their source of livelihood is this crime. Maybe they walk around, break into people's homes, steal, kill people, or even a gun for hire. There could be even issues like land issues, for example. Maybe some people are trying to do some cleansing of people from certain lands, so that it could be. That's why the police need to go to the depth of this. Unfortunately, and I want to say this straight to the face of our Inspector General of Police, in this country, mostly when a bad thing happens, the last place you have hope is from the police, that they will investigate it. The police will do the top dressing, arrest some alleged someone, lock them up, but that's as far as it may go. It's like the stories you're asking us, what should we have covered? I mean, in details. Most police investigations don't go into details. That is why someone will kill, even the wrong people get arrested. I met a guy in Java yesterday. Me and you meet in Java many times. This guy is from Meru, so he saw me up, he walked over to me. He was dressed in an Islamic dress, so I could tell he's a Muslim, he was fasting. Then he tells me, bro, I need your help. I want to sue the police. I said, why do you want to sue the police? He said, the day a bomb exploded on Latema Street, I was passing by. The anti-terror saw me in Islamic garb, arrested me, and I was locked in for 14 days unfairly. He said I was insulted, I was incarcerated, and I was innocent. He said, unfortunately, my passport had some foreign stamps, especially to the Islamic nations. He said they thought I'm a terrorist. He said later they released me without any charges. Okay. All right. So the police need to investigate the details, not arrest the wrong people. All right, and we'll come back again to who we are in terms of being the members of the Fourth Estate. I'll come to you, Dr. Enio, on this particular story in Matungu. Your initial thoughts on what is happening here, and maybe are there areas that possibly we haven't looked at? Is this just isolated crime? Is it just criminals who are out maybe to steal and end up killing?
Thank you. When you look at Matungu and how it has been covered, it gives an impression that there is some organized crime. That's the impression it creates, given the statistics. But we really don't know whether similar incidents of that magnitude also happen elsewhere in the country. But coming back to Matungu again, for me, I think from a trainer's point of view and the journalist, sometimes we expect, in my view, too much from the police. If the police have embarked on an investigation, how much are they likely to give us as media to share with the rest before investigations are complete? How much are they likely to give us? Some people have been killed. People have come forward and assist police with investigations by giving information here and there. The police have to look at the information to see whether it's credible or not. So during the level of investigations, I don't think the police would give us as much as we expect. Yeah.
Or even after the investigations, because like Mwenda Mijiwe highlights, how much do we get back to that story to find out what actually happened? There are so many stories that are left hanging. But let me bring in Mr. Wabala here. And as an investigative journalist, you've done this for a while. What are some of the things that we should be picking from this story? We already have a story on page 22 of the Standard this morning, and it says 3 politicians linked to Matungu gang killings, which as investigations continue, there's what we can do, there's what we can highlight. There's definitely a level of organized crime, because these are not isolated cases. To have 20 people dying in one area, and we have gangs that are coming up with even names, I think 14, there's
14 brothers.
Yes.
42 brothers.
So what is it that you feel as an investigative journalist we should be picking from this story already?
Definitely. In my understanding, at the look of things, definitely this is organized crime. For me it is, because it cannot be sporadic that people can be so organized to do what they are doing. Their modus operandi seems to be similar. They are hacking people to death. The other day they mentioned that there was somebody found with a mini Seska. Among those people who were arrested, they recovered a machete and a mini Seska. But be that as it may, this is not the first time this is happening in this place. A few kilometers away from Matungu, in Buka Mumias police station, a gun actually grabbed 7 guns from the police station and disappeared with it. When GSU were taken there for a couple of days, those guns just materialized from somewhere. So they were found in a sugarcane plantation, and I think 1 or 2 were found with guys who were on a motorcycle. They were riding.
And for people to walk into a police station, steal guns, that is a national security issue.
Yes, that is.
But it doesn't seem to have been given as much, emphasis.
It is such like things, such like precedences that embolden the criminals. They did that in 2013 in Bungoma when they went hacking people in a village. And until today, we actually haven't gotten to the bottom of what happened in 2013 in Bungoma area when that was happening. And if this is not solved, if people are not caught and punished for this, believe you me, it's going to happen either in Busia or it is going to happen in Kiso. It's going to happen. So and the fact that we as journalists have on this story, it says the 7 people have been lynched, but there is a link that some chiefs and assistant chiefs are being actually mentioned of covering up, that when names of when well-intentioned Kenyans are going and telling the security agents or the chiefs that I suspect Erneo is involved or Mbijiwe is involved for reasons that they give, and then it ends up that my name is actually given to those I have mentioned to the police. It means that there is something that doesn't meet the eye. And the fact that border guys are actually, that the locals are actually telling police that, hey, politician so and so is giving money, 500 bob, to these border guys, not to do anything but just to cause chaos around. Those are some of the things.
It leaves
I think
so many questions
unanswered.
Mwenda Bijiwe, let's bring in now the aspect of militia groups. It's not the first time that we've had them in Kenya. We've had the likes of Mungiki, Wakaliwao. I mean, there are several. Now, this one we have 14 brothers and 7 brothers. It seems like there's definitely a group, whether politically driven or whatever their motive may be, but there seems to be an organization that has come together in this area. Yes. From your expert analysis, what are some of the things that we should be tying together to other groups, because maybe they have learned from others?
First of all, and I agree with my colleague, this is not the first group to surface. There's been groups like Sungu Sungu, and by the way, there was even a serious one that became almost militaristic. It's a militia that bore arms, the SLDF, the one that dominated Mount Elgon. Now, one characteristic of all these groups is, first of all, they create fear in their host community. So once they dominate you with fear, you cannot tell on them. In fact, they go a step further and invest in their own intelligence network. So they know who talks. For example, in Mount Elgon area, SLDF invested in intelligence, so much so that if you left the village, they wanted to know where you went. Some will even follow you to the nearest towns, but if you go so far that they can't follow you, they will be waiting for you to tell them where you went. So much that the area was pacified with fear. No one would say. Criminals were known. They walked in Tharaka Nithi, my neighboring county. You heard about the story of some chief who was killed by villagers because of some other issues. When the area OCS went to follow up, one of the alleged killers came out with a machete to slash the OCS, and the informer, the guy who guided the OCS to where he was. He actually managed to slash that guy's head and actually killed him on the spot. OCS decided to unleash his fire on him, the firearm. Then the villagers thought, no, we need to sympathize with our guy, and they killed the OCS. The rest is a story like they say. GSU is in town. However, these groups create fear in the community. Now, the villagers in Tharaka Nithi, it's an area called Kamaende, they know the people, but they have been controlled by fear. You can't tell on them. If you talk, they'll break your house at night, they'll kill your children, they'll burn your house or something. So the first thing police need to do is get there and break that spell of fear.
Okay, now we from the media side cannot really instruct the police what to do, but our responsibility is to ensure that we highlight some of these things so that now the police can pick it, and if they don't, the jury's out there.
The thing is, if you tell a story today, nothing is done, you tell it tomorrow, nothing is done, you tell it the next day, I can assure you someone is going to pay attention.
Okay, Dr. Enio?
Yes, thank you. For me, I think maybe it's a slightly different perspective, especially what is expected of us as media. How much of this should we tell so that we don't fall into the trap of glorifying crime or adding more pain to those who have become victims?
Right.
Because if we look at our code of conduct for the practice of journalism, it gives us guidelines on how far we can go in terms of highlighting these things. Society may expect us to provide all the gory details, but the danger is that there are people out there, once they get these gory details on or how some of these crimes are committed, they may want to emulate. They may want to follow the instructions, basically.
And sometimes even some of these perpetrators of fear, like you mentioned, actually want it to be out there for the fear to be spread.
Yes. So it's very dangerous for us as media persons, and then because on a few occasions I've read some stories where we graphically say how the deaths have been carried out. The question is, are we sensitive to the pain of the relatives of those?
So how far should we go? So how far should we go with a story like this?
I think for me, raising it to the eyes or ears of those who should take action is sufficient. But when you provide so many gory details and sometimes even claim that we know who could be behind it. For instance, when I look at some of these things, remember that these are preliminary investigations. These are claims that have not been verified. We are dragging in people who can easily be identified from these stories, even if we are not providing the names. But if you read between the lines, you can conclude, for example, in Matungu, who would that MP be? Who will be the ward person, and so on. We are also exposing ourselves to potential libel suits.
Okay. Bonawabala, you're an investigative journalist, and of course, part of telling the story is those details that he's talking about, because we could say 5 people dead. But if you said 5 people hacked to death, that draws attention. That tells us the magnitude. So at what point do we draw the line and say that with this kind of stories, this is how far we tell? I mean, looking at even the picture that is on page 22 of the Standard, there are those two pictures give us attention to what's happening. You have a police officer with a member of parliament in conversation. On the inset, you have a picture of a family who have lost a loved one, and of course mourning and crying. But that tells us the story. How far do we draw the line?
I think we should abide by a code of conduct, because then it will help you guide. As much as you want to give the gory details of what has happened, just to shock the public on the message that you're trying to
get across.
Because I'm saying that as I looked in retrospect to 3 cases, the Joey murder case, the one in which Maribe is involved, Jackie Maribe is involved, and I'm looking at the other one of this man who supposedly, who's Mpango Akando killed the wife.
The one here in Nairobi.
And Obado case. We went, as media, we went into the case. We were so engrossed into the case and gave the details and all that. But then when the case goes to court, what is presented comes out different from what we had reported. So like Dr. Neo is saying, we actually expose ourselves to libel.
Possible libel
because of how we reported. And the fact that we cannot defend ourselves because what has been presented by the police to court, by the prosecution to court, is different from what we have written. So we need, as much as we need to expose and say what it is, we need to be able to rely on information that is defensible. We just don't churn out information as...
And that now... interject on what he's just said. I was reading another one this week, I think, one of those deaths caused by lovers. A love against another. A case has already been taken to court on day 1, where basically the accused is presented, a plea is read to them, and all they say is whether they plead guilty or not guilty. That's where it ends. But when I open the newspaper, or when I listen to radio or watch TV, the details you get are those that can only be in a police investigation file. Now the question is, what happened with the journalistic standards? There is a particular way in which we tell our stories. We know our limits. We know how far we can go. But here is a situation where we are now asking the police to give us their investigation file so that it provides more meat to a story. And then we ignore the fact that in a country like ours, there is a presumption of innocence. We are all innocent until proven guilty. And every one of us is entitled to a fair trial. So if you now take evidence which has not been tested as if it was factual, then what does that mean in terms of a fair trial? In some instances, people would, a court properly constituted would probably decide that the person has already been tried and condemned and convicted in the media. So there is nothing else that really the court should do.
All right, Mwandabichio, you wanted to weigh in on that.
Actually, I was supporting my brother Wabala on the point of libel, because sometimes what we know a story as here publicly is not eventually what goes to court. For example, there is the controversial issue that is in court of his namesake's crisis. A counsel who has had a problem with his family, his son, was allegedly...
The lawyer?
allegedly shot by mistake. Then the story has been evolving in a different dimension. There's what we hear in the public cycle. Then what goes to court is manslaughter, and everybody is, screams, including the DCI, says no. I want to amend. He suspends the officers. I want to amend the file. Then we see the wife coming to say, no. We want the case to go the way it was. Anyway, the media sometimes is handicapped. You just can't tell what you know, even when you do, because libel laws are there, and some cases will come into court. And now, assuming the media told the story of his namesake in a different dimension, or what we are hearing in the public, then manslaughter comes to court. And let's assume maybe the manslaughter story goes all the way. The charges of manslaughter are completely different from murder. Then now he says, okay, and these are cancelled. The media should run, because you show up with the story and say, you convicted me of this. This is what it was. Now you owe me 80 million, not 8 million. And
all right, and Wabala, question here being, we are sometimes caught between a rock and a hard place, in the sense that there are cases we know that may not get to trial because of foul play. That we cannot ignore. So we are there to ensure that that does not happen, or at least we highlight the facts and the truth. Now the question being, and I spoke to a judge once, and I remember she highlighted that and said, look, for instance, if in the media it is written that there was DNA testing that was done towards a certain case, but that DNA testing is not presented in court, the judge cannot act on what was written in the papers, whereas to the public, as far as they're concerned, that person is as guilty as they come. How do we ensure that we give the truth and the facts, so that cases are not, played under the carpet and, sort of wished away, but at the same time maintain the credibility that we are supposed to have? Because again, we're not supposed to convict somebody who's not guilty until they're proven guilty by a court.
If you just rely on facts. If there was DNA and I have proof that there was DNA and it was done, I will say there was DNA. Whether the prosecution,
whether it gets to court or not.
Yeah, whether it gets to court or not.
But of course,
so long as I have
what you'd be required then to have is a supporting evidence.
Supporting evidence, yeah. And that's why I said, if I have the evidence, if I have the supporting document that shows that DNA was conducted, I will write it and say the DNA was conducted. Whether they the prosecution chooses to use the DNA or not, it's not. If the court calls upon me to present that, assuming that the accused challenges my story, then I'll present it. Yeah, that is our role. We are not the judge. We are not.
Ours is just to present the facts. You agreed, Dr. Nia?
To some extent, but pragmatically, if you think about it, when you're sourcing for a story, you rely on certain people to give you this information. For example, somebody from in an hospital will tell you, or from government will tell you, a DNA was conducted, and these were the results. It is unlikely that they will give you a copy of the DNA result.
That's private.
Yeah. In the event that the matter becomes contentious, then the question will be, where will be the media with this evidence? Because truth in courts of law is that which you can verify or justify. It is not what you think that matters. It is about what you can demonstrate to the court that
it needs to
truly
be factual.
This happened. So where does that leave the media with the initial story that the DNA was conducted, and then when you are in court, you realize that the DNA results are not there, and probably there is no record.
All right, that leaves us in a tight place. Now, going back to Matungu, I want us to wind up with Matungu, and I'll start with you, Mwenda Mbijiwe, on some of the things that possibly we need to look out for. We have established from what we have seen there could be some organization. There are already details of groups calling themselves 14 Brothers, and I think others calling 7 Brothers. There is a question of politics that has come into play, but what do you feel is what we should follow up as the media to ensure that this doesn't just, those 20 lives have been lost? 20 is too many. 1 is too many.
Yeah, the media focus should now, remain consistently, endlessly on the investigation that the police will conduct. And I'm telling you, it doesn't matter how unprofessional some of these policemen may want to do their job, which is against what they were trained. They have been trained to do their job professionally. But some may decide to be otherwise, either out of laziness or, lack of motivation. So the media should focus on this story consistently, even going to asking deeper questions. And my colleague on the other end, the lecturer, talked about, the police file and the information that can go. I agree with Wabala. Some of that information in that file actually needs to find its way into the media somehow. And the moment, not everything, of course, not to the extent of compromising the police investigation, but to the extent, and the journalists, I'm sure they're professionally trained to know what to tell, really, and the limits. Even the news editors in the media houses are professional enough to know this should not go beyond here. But the story should go deep, dig deep, because sometimes we should also discourage, lazy reporting. I shudder to say, but some journalists are lazy in their research of stories. They just do some hearsay, and not even go to anything deeper that could elicit response, even from government, from the police. And so we should, I ask the media to focus on this investigation. We want to know, these politicians, for example, is it true, or someone is even bringing in a political angle just to finish some politician? Maybe it's not even true. Someone should find out if it is actually true, how factual it is, so that we can put this in the right perspective, and most importantly, so that we can rest, or rather, we can serve justice to the families that have lost their loved ones in these heinous attacks.
All right, Dominic, your closing comments.
I would appeal to the government to get to the bottom of this, and in political science, this is governance is the use of coercion, or the threat of use of coercion, to bring people into line. Now, if this is not dealt with, there are going to be replica killings, just like this. And not that that this government doesn't have resources. I mean, the CID have been given all the cars that they so need, or all the resources that they are available. They are mobile, and why is it so difficult that the supposedly 42 brothers or 14 brothers or whatever they want to call themselves? How is it? Because this is an affront to the security. Then they are daring the security. Do what you can.
Literally, they're daring them. Let's see what you can do.
Let's see what you can do. Okay. And it would be unfortunate if they are unable to deal with this.
Okay, Dr. Nyamboga, your closing comments. You get the last word.
Thank you. I think on the Matungu killings and what the media should do, since this is still reporting crime and nobody has been arrested, I think we should keep our eyes on what the police are actually doing, so that at this level we can report as much as possible from the police, as opposed to when people are charged. Once they are taken to court, then it means that we will be confined to what is happening in court as opposed to what we can get. And the other thing I would say is that as communication, as journalists, we should run away from reporting on behalf of the police as opposed to covering crime, because there is that danger where basically we are doing, we are the mouthpiece of the police as opposed to really covering the crime itself. There are many other things you can get outside the police. So if you have to wait for everything to come from the police, then there is a danger that so much will be buried.
We'll actually be reporting on their behalf. Thank you very much, Dr. Nyamboga, who is a communications lecturer, Mwenda Bijiwe, security expert, and Dominic Wabala, who's an investigative journalist. Thank you for joining us this morning.